The night was almost silent on the red sky planet, but the silence felt dangerous. Wind moved through the tall black trees like whispering ghosts. The ground shook again and again, as if something heavy was walking far beneath the soil. In the middle of this dark forest ran a mother named Zyra. Her breathing sharp, her steps fast. She held a small bundle close to her chest, and inside it, her newborn child struggled to breathe. Zyra's skin shimmered like dark crystal, and her eyes glowed softly, but that glow weakened with every step. She had been running for hours, running from creatures that attacked her village and poisoned her baby. She prayed that the baby would last long enough for her to reach the sacred ground. The sacred ground was the place where mothers of her species came when they believed there was no hope left. It was where they buried the young ones who could not survive. As Zyra pushed through the thick trees, tears fell silently from her eyes. She remembered how her village burned behind her, how the poison mist covered everything like a deadly fog. She remembered the screams, the cries, and the moment she realized her child had breathed the poison air. The baby's small chest had started shaking and its skin turned cold. Zyra knew then that there was only one place left to go, the place where she could give her child peace when she reached the sacred ground. The sky flashed with red lightning. The land here was soft and dark, shaped by many graves that had been dug long before her time. Her legs felt weak, her heart felt broken, but she forced herself to kneel. She placed the baby gently on a rock beside her, whispering words from the old language. Then she began to dig, using her hands because she had no tools. Her fingers cut on sharp stones, but she did not stop. Every handful of soil felt like she was pulling pieces of her heart out of her chest. The baby cried weakly, a sound so faint it almost blended with the wind. Zyra looked down at the small face, at the half-closed, glowing eyes. She touched the baby's forehead, hoping for warmth, but feeling only cold. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I am sorry, my star child." She had lost hope, but she still wished for a miracle, even though she no longer believed in miracles. As she dug, a strange sound appeared in the sky. It was not thunder, though it sounded like metal tearing through clouds. Zyra looked up, confused, but the clouds were too thick to see anything above. She told herself it was only the storm. Nothing more. She focused again on the grave. The small hole nearly finished now. Her hands trembled as she worked faster, each moment hurting more than the last. At last, the grave was deep enough. She lifted her child with shaking arms and held the baby close for the final time. The baby barely moved, barely breathed. And Zyra's heart broke completely. A long cry escaped her, but the storm swallowed the sound. She placed the baby gently inside the small grave, arranging the cloth around it. Her tears fell into the soil, mixing with the dark earth. For a moment, she hesitated, her hands frozen above the grave. But the baby's chest did not rise again. Zyra believed the child was gone, slowly, painfully. She began covering the grave with soil. Each handful felt heavier than the last. Her body shook with grief. With fear, with exhaustion, she whispered goodbye, her voice small and broken, when the grave was closed. Zyra sat back, empty and defeated. The storm roared across the sky, but she could not feel the rain anymore. Her world felt cold and silent. After some time, Zyra stood, her steps slow and weak. She walked away from the sacred ground, each step heavier than the one before. She did not look back, because she believed the child was now part of the stars. But what Zyra did not know, what she could not even imagine, was that someone had seen her from the shadows of the forest. A human, a soldier named Sergeant Daniel Hale, watched her disappear among the trees. His ship had crashed nearby, and he had crawled out moments earlier, injured and confused. When he saw Zyra burying the baby, he misunderstood. He thought she was harming the child, not mourning it. And when she left, Daniel dragged himself toward the grave. He wiped away the soil with shaking hands, then froze, shocked, as he felt a tiny movement inside the cloth. The baby was still alive, and Daniel Hale, alone on a strange alien world, whispered one thing under his breath. "I'm not letting you die." Sergeant Daniel Hale sat in the cold dirt, holding the tiny alien baby in his trembling hands. The storm wind pushed against him, carrying dust and red sparks from the sky. Pain shot through his ribs from the crash. But he forced himself to stay steady. The baby let out a weak sound, so soft Daniel had to lean closer to hear it. He could feel it breathing, slow and shallow. Like a candle about to fade, Daniel's heart pounded harder than the storm above him. He had seen many things in war, but he had never seen a mother bury a child while it was still alive. He thought she was cruel at first, but now he understood he had seen only half the truth. Maybe the mother believed the baby was dead, or maybe she had no way to save it. Either way, Daniel knew one thing for sure. He could not let another child die in front of him. His memories stung like fresh wounds years ago on Earth. He had lost his own daughter during a medical emergency. He had been too far from home, too far from help, watching, helpless, and since that day, the smallest cry of any child on any world pierced straight into his soul. He whispered under his breath, "Not again, please. Not again." Daniel looked toward his crashed ship, which lay half buried under broken trees and glowing red dust. The ship was damaged, but his medic kit might still be inside. He shifted the baby closer to his chest and stood up slowly. Fighting the pain in his legs, the ground shook beneath him, and he heard distant growls that didn't belong to the wind. He knew that danger was never far on this planet. He had seen creatures moving in the shadows as he fell from the sky. Still, he pushed forward, stepping carefully through the cracked soil. Each step hurt, each breath burned. But the baby's tiny heartbeat against his chest kept him going. The forest trees bent around him, their branches sharp like claws. He moved as fast as he could, hearing those growls growing louder behind him. He didn't have time to look back. He only had time to run. Reaching the crashed ship felt like reaching a dying hope. The metal was twisted, the lights were dead, and smoke still rose from the vents. Daniel kicked aside debris with his boot, trying to find the emergency hatch. His fingers shook as he searched the control panel, which sparked angrily at his touch. The hatch finally opened halfway, and Daniel squeezed himself inside with the baby held close. Inside the ship, everything was dim and broken. Wires hung from the walls like long dead vines, and sparks popped from shattered screens. He stepped over fallen crates until he reached what he needed most, a small silver box with a red cross on top. His medical kit, cracked, but still usable. Daniel opened it quickly and checked the baby again. The small body was cold, the breathing weak, and its tiny skin had patches of dark color. "Poison," Daniel whispered, remembering the green smoke he had seen rising from the burning village earlier. He didn't know the biology of this species, but poison was poison. Pain was pain. A dying baby was a dying baby. No matter the shape, he pulled out a scanner, and the machine hummed as it read the baby's condition. The screen flickered, but gave him just enough data to work with. The poison was spreading through the child's blood. But slowly, that meant there was still time. Daniel mixed 2 medicines, one for toxins and one for breathing support. He prayed they were not too strong for such a small life. With careful hands, he injected the medicine into the baby's thin arm. Then he wrapped the child in his thermal blanket, using the ship's emergency heater to warm it. Minutes passed slowly, painfully, as Daniel waited for any sign of improvement. He listened to the storm rage outside, hoping the mother had gone far away. He did not want to face her yet, not until the baby was safe. At last, the baby moved, just a small twitch, but enough to make Daniel's breath catch. He leaned closer, watching the small chest rise a little faster. A little stronger color returned slowly to the baby's skin. The tiny fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. Daniel almost cried from relief as he whispered, "You're going to make it." Little one, but his relief didn't last long. A sound echoed outside the ship. A low growl followed by heavy steps crushing the soil. Daniel froze, holding the baby tighter. It wasn't the mother this time. It was something bigger, something hunting. Something smelling the heat of life. Daniel stood up slowly, grabbing his weapon with one hand and the baby with the other. The ship trembled as the creature's shadow moved across the broken metal. He whispered again, not to the baby this time, but to himself, "Whatever comes, we face it together." The red dawn rose slowly over the forest, turning the sky into a sea of burning colors. The storm had calmed, but the air still felt heavy, still felt dangerous. Zyra walked with shaking legs through the thick silence, following the path she had taken only a few hours earlier. She clutched her arms tightly against her chest, trying to hold her heart together. Her eyes were dry now, empty, as if she had cried out every tear her body held. But as she neared the sacred ground again, a strange feeling grew inside her. Something was wrong. Something did not feel as it should. The forest was too quiet, too still. And even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Zyra stepped closer to the burial ground, her feet sinking into the wet soil. Then she froze completely. The small grave she had dug with her own bleeding hands was open. The soil she had placed over her child hours before was pushed aside. The grave was empty, absolutely empty. For a moment, her mind refused to understand what she was seeing. Her breath stopped as a sharp fear stabbed through her body. She fell to her knees beside the open grave. Her hands ran over the disturbed soil, trembling like they were touched by lightning. "No, no. This cannot be," she whispered in her language, her voice breaking. Her child's scent was faint, but still there, mixed with another scent that did not belong to her kind. The scent of metal, smoke, and something unfamiliar. Zyra lifted her head slowly and looked around the silent forest. Her eyes searched the ground until she spotted something strange near a broken tree trunk. Footprints, but not footprints of her species, and not footprints of any creature she knew. They were long, wide, heavy, and shaped almost like the feet of the old legends. The legends that spoke of beings who came from the stars with fire and thunder. Her fear twisted into something stronger. Anger. Someone had taken her child's body. Someone had stolen her grief, stolen her goodbye, stolen her final moment as a mother. Her hands clenched into fists so tight that her nails cut her skin. She stood slowly, her breathing deep and fierce. She whispered a promise to the wind. "I will get my child back." Zyra followed the footprints deeper into the forest. The air grew colder, the ground darker, and strange marks appeared on the trees. Metal scratches, burned bark, signs of a crash or explosion. She moved silently, her instincts sharp, her ears catching every distant noise. After nearly an hour of tracking, she reached a place where the trees bent outward, the soil was torn apart, and smoke curled from something half buried in the earth. It was a strange metal structure, sharp-edged and glowing faintly. It hummed with energy, a sound she had never heard before. Zyra crouched behind a rock, her eyes locked on the crashed object. Her breath caught in her throat when she heard something inside. A soft cry, the cry of her baby. Alive, her heart leaped so hard she almost ran toward the sound. But then she saw another movement. A tall figure stepped out of the broken metal door. A human, though she did not know that word yet. Daniel Hale stood in the doorway, holding the baby in his arms, wrapped in a warm cloth. The child's breathing was steadier, its glow returning softly. Zyra's heart twisted with confusion and fear. Why was the stranger holding her baby? Why was the child alive after she had buried it? How had this being touched the grave she had made with her own hands? Zyra felt her breath turn into fire. She stepped out from behind the rock, gripping her spear tightly. The wind stirred as she moved, her feet silent on the soil. Her eyes shone with rage and hope fighting inside her. Daniel heard a branch snap and turned quickly. When he saw Zyra, he froze. She stood like a shadow of fury. Her spear raised, her eyes locked on her child. Daniel lifted his free hand slowly, trying to show he meant no harm. He spoke softly, his voice shaking. "I'm not your enemy," but Zyra did not know his words. All she knew was that someone had taken her baby from the grave. She shouted, a sound full of pain and fury. Daniel stepped back, holding the baby close as he tried to protect it. Zyra lunged forward, but she stopped mid-step when she heard it. The baby cried, louder this time, stronger, alive. Zyra's eyes widened, her spear lowering slowly for the first time since the night. Hope crashed into her like a storm. Her baby was alive. Alive in the arms of a stranger she did not trust, but alive. And everything she thought she knew about the stranger changed in one heartbeat. Her rage turned into confusion, fear, and something she had lost hours ago, a fragile spark of hope. Daniel stood at the entrance of his broken ship, frozen like a soldier facing a wild storm. Zyra stood only a few steps away, her spear raised again, her eyes glowing with fear and fire. The baby's soft cry cut through the silence. Shaking them both, Daniel held the child closer, his heart beating fast, wondering if the mother would attack or listen. Zyra's hands trembled as she stared at the baby wrapped in human cloth. She had buried her child under the red sky. Yet the little one breathed now, warm and alive. Her mind could not understand it. Her heart could not trust it. Her instinct screamed danger. But her mother's heart whispered something else. A living child was a miracle, a gift, a reason to fight. And Zyra had always been a mother before she was anything else. Daniel slowly placed his weapon on the ground. Sliding it away from himself to show peace, he raised his empty hand with open fingers. The universal sign of no threat, but Zyra did not know human signs. She only saw a strange creature with pale skin and metal clothes holding her child. She took one step forward, then stopped, unsure whether to attack or beg. Daniel felt the tension in the air like electricity. He spoke softly. "It's okay. I saved the baby. I'm trying to help." The words were useless to Zyra, who heard nothing but noise, but the tone touched something inside her. A calm sound, a gentle sound, a sound that did not match the sharp spear in her hand. Daniel slowly crouched and placed the baby on a soft piece of cloth near the door. He kept one hand between himself and Zyra to show he meant no harm. Zyra watched every movement like a hunter watching a dangerous creature. Her breath came fast, her eyes wide, her hands tense. When Daniel stepped back, she rushed forward and lifted her child from the cloth. Holding it tight against her chest, she checked the baby's face. Its glowing eyes, its small breaths. She felt the warmth that had been missing during the night. She touched the tiny hands that curled around her fingers. A sound escaped her lips, half sob, half relief. Her child was alive, stronger than before, and her heart almost broke from the shock. But when she looked back at Daniel, her confusion returned. How had this stranger revived her dying child? Why had he interfered with this sacred burial? What did he want? Zyra stepped back, her grip tight. Her instincts still sharp. Her spear remained in her other hand. Ready if the human tried anything, Daniel watched her carefully, trying to read her alien expressions. He could see the fear, the anger, and the love fighting inside her. He pointed gently at the baby and said slowly, "Medicine. I used medicine." To help, Zira tilted her head at the unfamiliar sound. She did not understand the words, but she felt the intention behind them. This being was strange. Yes, but not violent, not a monster. Suddenly, a sharp roar echoed through the forest. The same roar Daniel had heard earlier. Zira spun around, her senses alert. She recognized the sound instantly. The poison beasts. The creatures that killed her people. The monsters that followed the scent of weakness. They were close, too close. Daniel grabbed his weapon again. Raising it quickly, Zira jumped back in fear, thinking he was attacking her. But then another roar shook the trees. Louder this time, Zira understood the truth. The human was preparing to fight the thing coming toward them, not her. They both turned toward the forest edge as dark shapes moved between the trees. Daniel spoke fast but calm, pointing to the ship and then to Zira and the baby. He motioned for her to stay low, stay hidden, stay safe. Zira understood the gesture this time. She placed her baby against her chest and crouched behind the metal doorway. Watching Daniel step into the open, the forest shook as something huge approached. Branches snapped, soil cracked, and the air filled with the smell of poison. Zira felt her heart race as she watched Daniel stand alone against the approaching beast. The human seemed small, weak, fragile compared to the creature. But he did not run. He did not hide. He stood between danger and her child, a strange, impossible act from a stranger she had feared only minutes ago. The beast stepped out of the shadows, its skin black like stone and its eyes glowing green. Daniel aimed his weapon, steady and sure. Zira held her baby close and whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for the strange warrior who had saved her child. For the first time, she did not see Daniel as an enemy. She saw him as a shield, a protector, a being willing to stand against death itself. The creature roared and charged. Daniel shouted and fired. The battle between two worlds began, and Zira watched with a heart full of fear, and a spark of trust she never expected to feel. The forest exploded with sound as the beast crashed toward Daniel, its claws tearing the soil like blades. Daniel steadied his breathing and fired again, each shot lighting the red dawn with bright flashes. The creature roared, the ground trembling under its weight, its poison breath pushing through the air like thick smoke. Zira held her baby close, watching with wide eyes as the human stood between the monster and her child. Her heart pounded, fear twisting into something new, something unexpected, respect. Or maybe something deeper than that, something she could not name. Daniel dodged the beast's first swipe, rolling across the broken roots and rising with a painful groan. His ribs burned, his legs shook, but he refused to fall. He fired again, hitting the creature's shoulder and slowing it for a moment. But the monster did not stop. It only grew angrier, its roar shaking the air like thunder. Zira felt the instinct of her people kick in. The instinct not to run, not to hide, but to protect. She lowered her baby gently behind a metal panel, wrapping the cloth tightly so the child stayed warm. Then she gripped her spear and leaped forward, moving like a shadow of speed. Her feet barely touched the ground as she circled the monster. Her eyes locked on its weak points. Daniel saw her coming from the corner of his eye. At first, he thought she might attack him. But then she jumped beside him and thrust her spear into the beast's hind leg. The creature roared in pain. Turning its rage toward Zira, Daniel shouted, "Watch out!" Even though she could not understand his words, still, she understood his voice. She moved just in time as the beast clawed the air where she had stood moments before. Daniel fired again, aiming for the creature's neck. Zira dodged past one strike, then another. Her spear flashing like silver lightning, they moved together without planning. Without speaking, yet perfectly in sync, a human soldier and an alien mother. Two enemies by nature, two allies by circumstance. At last, the monster fell with a heavy crash. Its body shook the earth one final time before it went still. Daniel dropped to one knee, breathing hard. Sweat dripping from his forehead. Zyra stood over the fallen creature, her chest rising and falling with exhaustion. For a moment, they simply stared at the dead beast, not as enemies, but as survivors. Slowly, Daniel stood again, wiping dust from his face. Zyra tightened her grip on her spear. Unsure what happened next, the danger was gone. But the silence felt heavy. Daniel looked toward the baby and then toward Zyra. He placed his weapon on the ground once more, showing he meant no harm. Zyra hesitated, her eyes softening but still guarded. She walked to her child, lifting it gently and checking its breathing. The baby stirred, warm and alive. Her heart softened further. The human had not only saved the child, but risked his life for it. Daniel pointed toward the forest, where more distant roars echoed through the trees. His face showed worry, urgency, warning. Zyra understood. The poison beasts hunted in packs. If one had found them, more would come. Her grip on her baby tightened and her fear returned. Daniel motioned for her to follow him inside the ship. He pointed to the sky, then to the ground, then to the dark forest. Trying to explain the danger with simple gestures, Zyra watched him carefully. Her instincts told her she had only two choices: stay and die, or follow the being who had brought her baby back from death. She nodded once, a small but powerful gesture. Daniel let out a breath of relief and stepped inside the ship. Zyra followed, keeping her child close as she entered the strange metal cave. The inside felt cold and unfamiliar, full of shapes she did not understand. But the human moved with purpose, checking lights, closing damaged panels. Preparing defenses, Zyra stood quietly, watching him work. She noticed he moved slowly. Holding his side as if he was hurt, he tried to hide it. But she could see the pain in his face. Still, he worked to protect them. Her chest tightened again. Confusion and gratitude mixing inside her. Daniel turned to her and pointed at the baby with a questioning look. Zyra nodded and showed him the child's steady breathing. Daniel smiled softly, and the expression surprised her. It was a small smile, tired and gentle. A smile that did not belong to an enemy. It belonged to someone who cared, before she could think more. Another roar echoed from the forest, closer this time. Daniel and Zyra exchanged a glance. No words, no shared language, but one clear understanding. They would face whatever came next together. For the first time in her life, Zyra trusted someone not of her world. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt he was fighting for something good, a human and an alien mother. Forced allies by danger, joined by a fragile trust. And by the tiny heartbeat of a baby that refused to die. The ground trembled again, this time harder. As if something giant was moving through the forest in long, heavy strides inside the broken human ship. Zyra held her baby close, feeling the vibrations run through the metal walls. Daniel stood near the entrance, gripping his weapon with both hands. His breathing slow but steady. He glanced at Zyra for a moment. And she met his eyes. No words passed between them. But the meaning was clear. If they did not fight together, they would die together. A low growl echoed from the trees. Deeper than the earlier beast, Daniel frowned, realizing something larger was hunting them now. Zyra felt her heart twist in fear, because she knew that sound too. It was the alpha of the poison beasts. A creature stronger, faster, and smarter than the others. Her people once believed these monsters were born from the earth's anger. And now one of them was coming straight toward her child. Daniel moved to the side and checked the power cells of his weapon. Only 2 charges left. Not enough, but he didn't show fear. He only tightened his jaw and whispered something to himself. Zyra couldn't understand the words, but she understood the emotion. This human was ready to fight, even if the chances were small. Another roar split the air, closer now, loud enough to shake loose dust from the ship's ceiling. Daniel motioned for Zyra to stay low. She tucked herself behind a broken pillar. Wrapping her baby tightly in her arms, the child slept. Unaware of the danger creeping closer, Zyra pressed her forehead to the baby's head and whispered a promise. "I will protect you." The forest outside went silent for a breath. Daniel felt the hairs on his neck stand up. He aimed at the darkness between the trees. Waiting, listening, breathing slowly, then the alpha beast appeared. A massive shape made of dark, stone-like skin and burning green eyes. Its breath hissed like steam, leaving trails of poison mist on the ground. Daniel fired his first shot, the blue flash lighting up the trees. The creature roared but kept charging. Barely slowed, he stepped back, firing again. Hitting the monster's shoulder. But it only made the monster angrier. The alpha lunged forward, smashing against the ship's metal frame, bending it inward with terrifying strength. Zyra felt the impact and covered her baby with her body. Daniel stumbled but stayed on his feet. The beast pushed its head through the opening, snapping its jagged teeth inches away from him. Daniel swung a metal pipe from the floor and hit the creature to block its advance. The pipe bent like soft wood under the monster's bite, but it bought him 1 second. And sometimes 1 second is enough. Zyra saw an opening. She placed her baby gently on the ground, wrapped securely. Then she rose silently like a shadow and sprinted toward the beast. Her spear aimed low where the monster's armor was weakest. She pierced its leg, twisting the spear with all her strength. The beast screamed and turned away from Daniel. Trying to crush her instead, Daniel saw the danger and jumped forward, grabbing Zyra's arm and pulling her away just in time. The beast's claw smashed into the ground where Zyra had stood a heartbeat earlier. Daniel fired his last shot into the beast's eye, blinding it on one side. The alpha staggered back, roaring in rage. But it was not defeated yet. It lowered its head and charged again. Faster this time, more desperate, Zyra pushed Daniel aside, saving him from the first strike move. She shouted instinctively, though he couldn't understand the word. But he understood her action. He rolled to the side. Grabbing a broken metal rod as a last weapon, the beast lunged toward Zyra. But she dodged with the speed of her species. She climbed onto the monster's back, gripping its rough skin. She struck again and again with her spear. Fighting with the strength of a mother protecting her child, Daniel saw the beast thrashing wildly. Trying to throw Zyra off, he ran forward, ignoring the pain in his ribs. He climbed onto a fallen beam for height and jumped, driving the metal rod into the beast's neck where Zyra had weakened the armor. The monster let out a final roar, loud and shaking, then fell to the ground with a heavy crash. Its body twitched once, then went still. Silence followed. Long, cold silence, broken only by Daniel's heavy breathing and Zyra's trembling sigh. Daniel stepped back, exhausted, and looked at Zyra. She looked at him too, her chest rising fast. Her eyes bright with emotion. They had fought like one mind. One instinct, one purpose, not human and alien. Not strangers and enemies, but protectors. Zyra picked up her baby again, holding it close. She walked to Daniel and touched his arm gently, a sign of respect, a sign of trust. A sign of something new forming between two beings from different worlds. They had survived together, but their journey was far from over, because in the distance, deep in the forest, more roars echoed, soft but real, a reminder that danger was not finished with them yet. Not even close. For a long moment, Daniel and Zyra stood over the fallen alpha beast. The forest around them slowly returned to silence. The wind carried away the poison mist. The leaves trembled softly, and the red sky brightened with the rising sun. Zyra held her baby tightly, feeling the warmth of life against her chest. Daniel leaned on a broken piece of metal, fighting the pain in his ribs, but still watching the mother and child with tired eyes. They had survived, but both of them knew survival was only the beginning. More beasts waded deeper in the forest, drawn by blood and sound. The ship was damaged, Daniel was injured, and Zyra was exhausted if they stayed here. The next attack would finish them. Daniel took a weak step toward Zyra and pointed to himself, then to her baby, then to the forest path leading away. His meaning was simple. We need to move. Zyra understood this. Even without words, her eyes softened and she nodded. Her grip tightening on her child, Daniel limped toward the back of the ship. Gathering whatever gear he could still use, a small pack, a half-working scanner, and a portable light, Zyra watched him closely. Still cautious, but no longer afraid, she knew now that this human had no desire to take her child. He had risked his life again and again to protect both of them. Only someone with a strong spirit would do that. Only someone with a heart full of something powerful would stand against death like that. When Daniel returned, he gave a gentle gesture toward the path. Zyra stepped beside him, and for the first time, they walked together, not as enemies. Not as survivors of chance, but as allies forged by fire and loss. The forest felt different now. The trees seemed less threatening, the wind more calm. Zyra led the way through hidden trails known only to her people. Daniel followed, scanning the surroundings and listening for danger. He was slower because of his injuries, but he pushed himself forward. Refusing to fall, Zyra noticed his pain. Every time he winced, she slowed her steps. Every time he stumbled, she kept closer to him. She remembered how he protected her child, how he shielded her from the alpha beast. It felt wrong to let him walk alone now. Hours passed, and the forest grew thinner. The red sky dimmed as the sun dipped low again, at last. Zyra stopped near a hidden cave carved into the side of a hill. The entrance was covered with vines that glowed softly with natural light. "This is safe," her eyes said, even though she spoke no words he could understand. Daniel nodded, trusting her completely inside the cave. Bioluminescent crystals lit the walls with gentle blue light. Zyra laid her baby on a soft patch of moss, checking its breathing. The child slept peacefully, healthier than before. Daniel felt his heart relax at the sight. Saving the baby had been the one good thing in his broken mission. The one reason he kept pushing through pain and fear. Zyra turned to him and studied him in silence. She saw the bleeding cut on his arm, the bruises on his ribs, the exhaustion in his face. He had fought for her child with the strength of a warrior and the heart of a parent. She stepped closer and touched his shoulder gently. A gesture of gratitude, a gesture of trust, a gesture of acceptance. Daniel looked at her and smiled softly. He touched his chest and said, "Daniel." Zyra blinked, then placed her hand over her own heart. "Zyra," she said quietly. Their first exchange of names. A bridge between two worlds. Suddenly, deep footsteps echoed outside the cave. Zyra tensed for a moment, but then she relaxed. These steps were familiar. Her people, her tribe, had arrived. Figures with crystal-like skin emerged from the shadows, carrying spears and torches. They stared at Daniel with suspicion, fear, and confusion. Zyra stepped between Daniel and the warriors, lifting her spear sideways to show he was not an enemy. Her voice echoed strongly through the cave. They did not understand her full story, but they understood her meaning. She was protecting him, just as he had protected her. One elder approached, looking at the baby. The child breathed softly, warm and alive. The elder turned to Daniel, his expression changing slowly from fear to understanding. He bowed his head slightly, a silent thanks for saving the life of one of their young. Daniel lowered his head too, showing respect. Zira looked at him with something new in her eyes, something deeper than trust. Something more powerful than gratitude, a bond formed by survival, courage, and shared battle in that moment. The tribe accepted Daniel as one of their own, not because he was human, but because he had something greater inside him. Humanity, a spirit that refused to let an innocent die. A heart that fought not for orders, but for life. As Zira held her baby and Daniel rested beside her, one truth became clear. Two worlds had met in darkness, and light had grown between them. A new beginning had been born in the cave that day, and it all started with a grave, and a human who refused to walk away.